Coming to you from Orange County, California, this is the JuggLife podcast with Max Ada and Chad Wesley Smith. Hey everybody, Chad here for the JuggLife podcast. This week we're going to be bringing you a classic episode, our episode on transgender athletes. And I wanted to revisit this episode for two reasons. First off, there is a show on Netflix that you could check out, a series called Sports on Fire, and they have an episode titled She Runs Like a Man. And in that, it talks about many of the same people we discuss in this episode, and the idea of intersex athletes and you know, all these different hormone issues and what I think is a much more complex and challenging problem for the greater sporting world to deal with compared to just transgender athletes, you know, people born male trying to transition to female or vice versa. Like we've seen in the case of Laurel Hubbard, which we discussed at the beginning of the episode here, as well as the Sports on Fire episode, She Runs Like a Man, which you can check out on Netflix, and I encourage you to do that. There was also a new ruling by the IAAF, the governing body for World Track and Field, regarding female classification and eligibility. And a lot of this, you know, as you talk to people in the know, they might as well call it the Caster Semenya rule. And Caster Semenya is, you know, this tremendous middle distance runner who we discuss in the episode here. And in the press release from a couple weeks ago they had regarding this, and I'll link that in the info for this episode so you can check it out for yourself. They talk specifically about events from 400 up to the mile, as well as hurdle races, and it's kind of like those are the distances that she runs. And the quick gist of it is that the new regulations require any athlete who has a difference of sexual development, it means her levels of circulating testosterone are 5 nanomoles per liter or above, and who is androgen sensitive, to meet the following criteria: that they must be recognized at law either as a female or as an intersex or equivalent. She must reduce her blood testosterone level to below 5 nanomoles per liter for a continuous period of at least 6 months, and thereafter she must maintain that level below 5 nanomoles per liter continuously, whether she is in or out of competition. And a lot of this ties back to the International Court of Arbitration in Sport case that we talk about in this episode. And when we recorded the episode originally, it was this time where things were still sort of being debated by the CAS, and they were still trying to figure out, you know, what do we do with testosterone and females, naturally occurring testosterone and females, and hyperandrogenism. And it's, you know, tremendously more prevalent in the world of elite level athletics for this hyperandrogenism to exist, and intersex athletes, and again, that's a distinction that we discuss more at length in the episode itself, intersex versus transgender, and it's just a tough place, and it's a lot of, you know, maybe gray area. You know, most female athletes, including elite female athletes, will have testosterone levels between 0.1 and 1.8 nanomoles per liter, while the male range is going to be anywhere from about 8 up to 30. But, you know, these females with the SRY gene, or this hyperandrogenism, have often internal testes. So, you know, they've born and lived their entire lives as women, you know, probably not knowing that they had, you know, male testicles inside of their body producing this testosterone, and aren't able to utilize it to the same level that male athletes are, but are certainly deriving some benefit from it. So now the IAAF and WADA and all of that are getting into the world of telling people who have something that is naturally occurring for them. This is not, exogenous hormones like injecting testosterone that they're using. They have naturally elevated testosterone levels, and now they're saying that that's a natural advantage that they are not allowed to have. And is this a necessary thing in this specific case? Yeah, it probably is, but does it open the door up for the slippery slope of regulating naturally occurring gifts that athletes have that set them apart? As an extreme example, are you going to tell a basketball player that he's too tall, or a hurdler that his legs are too long, or a swimmer that his hands and feet are too big, or something like that? So I think it opens up an interesting discussion. I felt that with this new ruling from the IAAF, and then this Sports on Fire episode that I'd just recently seen, that this was a pertinent topic. So please give this a listen. This was originally episode number 49 on transgender athletes. And as always, you can find the JuggLife podcast on YouTube, iTunes, Stitcher, iHeartRadio, Spotify, and thejugglife.com. This week's episode is brought to you by Dollar Shave Club and Purple Mattresses. So you can visit dollarshaveclub.com/juglife or purple.com/juglife to check out the special offers they have for our listeners. Enjoy the episode, and we'll see you next week. Hey everybody, Chad Wesley Smith here, bringing you another episode of the JuggLife podcast. Joined as always, Montana Miracle Man, Max Ada. How you doing, buddy?
Doing pretty well. How are you doing, Chad?
Pretty good. Hopefully I'm saying the same in an hour. So today we're going to be probably talking about one of our most serious topics, our most sensitive subjects, certainly we've ever addressed on this show, and that is the concept of transgender athletes, of gender testing in sport, and it's becoming a more prevalent issue, something more at the forefront of athletics every day, and something that we wanted to address because it had a pretty direct effect on Max's wife, Joanne Ada, at the recent World Games for weightlifting. So could you talk about the situation there?
There was, in the Masters World Games, we had one competitor I know of, Laurel Hubbard, is transgendered and competed in the super heavyweight category in the female division, and won. I think made like a personal record snatch, 131 kilos, and then maybe clean and jerk to like 149, I think. And obviously won Grandmaster, beat the field by a huge margin.
And Joanne was the runner-up for Grandmaster.
Yeah, Joanne was second place overall to that.
Grandmaster is a comparison by Malone Metzer.
Yeah.
So an age-adjusted Sinclair formula. So Joanne would have been the best female lifter of the entire competition had it not been for Laurel Hubbard.
Yeah. There's also, that's not the first. There's obviously been a lot of stuff. Not a lot, but there's been cases of this happening. Not this happened, this particular thing happening, but of transgendered competitors in other sports too. You've got a few years ago, there was Caster Semenya.
Well, before we get into that, I think let's make a disclaimer here. We're probably going to have to make many disclaimers throughout this episode that Max and I are not experts in this. We're not professing to be experts in this. We're going to share the limited amount of research we've done on the rules and effects of gene therapy and all this stuff, and then things that are our opinions. We're not setting out to offend people in this. More likely than not, we'll probably say something wrong. We're going to call something wrong name, wrong term. We don't know everything that's the right stuff to say. So please understand that when we're going.
Bear with us here for a second.
So the first important distinction I think to make as we get into this is that Laurel Hubbard was born and lived as a man for the
Right.
overwhelming majority of her life. Other athletes we're going to talk about, and probably even a bit more of what we're going to talk about, are female athletes who, on their birth certificate, it says female. They've lived their entire lives as women, and then at some point during their athletic career, when they were more likely than not very, very good, the competitors and people around the sport said, what's going on here? This is not a woman.
Right.
And then applying some level of gender testing. So that's going to be a very important distinction to make between Laurel Hubbard, born as a man, competing as a woman, and Caster Semenya, who we'll talk about more, Maria Martinez Patino, who we'll talk about more, born as women, and then gender testing issues
Right.
on in their career.
And I think, the major thing is that all of the stuff that comes out, the stories and whatnot, I think maybe clump everybody together into the same categories. Like, oh, there's this sort of gender identity stuff. That's this whole category. There's a lot of different things, like Chad was saying. There's a lot of different things actually going on with very specific circumstances around each individual athlete's scenario. And so obviously, like you just said, Laurel Hubbard was transitioned from male to female, and then you have other situations that are maybe very different, where an athlete is maybe even unaware of, pre-existing situations that are not as obvious or not as conscious, right?
Yeah. So let's establish kind of the rules. Again, this is from a limited amount of research, so there may be updates to these rules since from where I read about them last night. But to our understanding, for the NCAA rule is that a transgender athlete, and just for the ease of this, we're probably going to use that as a bit of a blanket term, understanding that it's going to encompass a lot of nuance within that, has to sit out from competition for 1 year while undergoing hormone therapy. And then the IOC rule, to compete as an Olympic athlete or in sports that are governed by Olympic sanctioned bodies like World Master Games for weightlifting, was that there must be 2 years of hormone therapy post-operation for like a post-gender reassignment surgery. Again, the terms. I might be saying the wrong word. I'm going to stop apologizing it for the rest of the time. Blanket apology for all the times that I mess up some of the terms here. And within that IOC rule, there at least was an establishment of a limit of testosterone of 10 nanomoles per liter of testosterone. One of the cases that we're going to talk about a little bit more, involving an Indian sprinter named Dutee Chand, looks like it's suspended for the ruling in that by the Court of Arbitration in Sport, suspended that limit. So in these situations, there is not a limit to how much testosterone female competitors could have. Now, where this gets a little bit cloudier too, and where I don't have a complete understanding of it, is how things are differentiated between no limit on testosterone and drug testing.
Yeah, that's it. That's really interesting to me, because it's I mean, obviously, yeah, there's motives for everything. I mean, you have to assume that every very competitive athlete has at some point had a motive. I mean, the motive to cheat is obvious, right? To win. So when you're in a situation where your personal life outside of sport involves whatever it involves in terms of what you believe should or shouldn't be in your life in terms of gender, et cetera, how that I don't it would be very unlikely, I think, to the stretch that somebody would reassign their gender or change gender to gain an edge in performance, because I suppose the recognition you gain from winning would also be, quote unquote, tainted by the incredible amount of stress that you have to go through in life. Just going through that process has got to be not an easy thing, whereas if you're just somebody who, cheats and takes drugs to win, that is what it is. And that's not,
very much a win at all costs scenario.
Yeah, that would be extreme.
Anything that it takes. So a little bit more about the IOC rule there. To my understanding, from what I've read, in 2015, through this case of Duty Chand versus the Athletics Federation of India and the ruling through the Court of Arbitration for Sport, the 10 nanomoles per liter of testosterone limit for women currently does not exist. That was the case in 2015, and they told the IAAF, the International Athletics Federation, the world governing body for track and field, that they had 2 years to prove that putting a limit on it is important, that essentially that testosterone is significant to female athletic performance. From where I'm sitting, that sounds like a no-brainer.
Yeah.
But it is clearly significant. But just as a reference point, that at least used to be 10 nanomoles per liter of testosterone was established as some limit. Potentially next month will be the 2-year mark from that case when the IAAF needs to reprove that 10 nanomoles per liter is a good number, where the normal range for women is 0.5 to 3 nanomoles per liter, and the range for men is 10 to 30. So they're basically saying that the cutoff is the bottom end range for men.
Right. That is very high.
Yeah. So that brings us to this idea for athletes like Duty Chand, who is the Indian national champion in the 100 meter, and I think only one of 2 or 3 women to ever represent India in the Olympics in that event. Athletes like Caster Semenya, who Max had mentioned, who's a world and Olympic champion in the 800 meters. An athlete we'll talk about a bit more named Maria Martinez Patino, a hurdler from Spain, who was kind of one of the first people to have failed a gender test and it become a big issue. All of those athletes different than Laurel Hubbard in that they have something called the SRY gene. And what that creates is androgen insensitivity syndrome. So, to my understanding, this is a crossing over of genes on the chromosomes, which results in the athlete having hidden testes with suppressed androgen receptors. So what we're getting to with that is an athlete who has a vagina with internal testicles and no uterus. I feel like I'm in eighth grade health class right now.
I mean, hidden testes just sounds like a game that your creepy uncle's trying to play with you. That's a definite no. Continue.
Yeah. So, with the presence of this SRY gene, you get, and with the suppressed androgen receptors of it, the androgen insensitivity syndrome component of this, you get athletes who were born as females, who their entire life have lived as females, who it says female on their birth certificate, but they're producing male amounts of testosterone, but because of the suppressed receptors, are not able to really take advantage of that. So
it's an interesting scenario. Did you read, or is there any information as to whether or not you can not have the SRY gene, but also have hidden testes? In which case, you would receive the more benefit from the testosterone. Obviously, you might not know that.
Yeah,
that would be
what
it. I guess.
Across.
Okay, maybe it goes hand in hand. Maybe that's the same scenario, right?
To my understanding, I'd say yes. That's what it happened. So, with that, kind of the resulting thing is you get a very genetically advantaged female athlete.
Right.
You get them with much more male-esque characteristics minus, the parts. And
one of the parts.
yeah, at least visible parts. And up to, we're going to talk some about gender testing, because up until the Mexico City Olympics in 1968, the gender testing process, had existed in the Olympics, had existed in international sports like track and field and stuff. And that test was, pull down your pants, let's see what you got.
The ocular pat down.
Yes, an ocular pat down. And that, not surprisingly, seemed to be insensitive and invasive to athletes, embarrassing all kinds of different things. Mm-hmm. So in 1968, and this practice continued from 68 all the way through the Atlanta Olympics in 1996, they began doing these cheek swabs and testing the chromosomes within the cheek swab. And where that became more confusing, more debatable, these gray areas, was within these hyper-androgynous athletes, or athletes with hyper-androgenism and the SRY gene, that they're looking at people and by their bone structure and their muscularity and all these different factors. Someone like Castor Semenya, probably looking at them thinking that is a man, but the genetic testing was showing otherwise, and that's where these debates arise from.
Right.
So
Castor Semenya was subject to the swab test, right?
Yes.
Okay.
So when Castor Semenya is a 800-meter runner, a long-distance runner for middle-distance runner, I guess, for South Africa, and she came along in 2009, and really no one had ever heard of her. And in the span of about 6 months, I want to say it took something like 8 or 9 seconds off of her PR in the 800, a race where women are running, Olympic level women are running right about the 2-minute mark, a little bit underneath that to make the finals. And at 2009 World Championships, came and ran like 156, 157, and won by 2, 3, 4 seconds. And people are like, we've never heard of this person. Yeah. Like, something's going on here, whether it's steroid use or whether it's transgender issues and whatever. Something's going on here. Test her. And they did that, and there was a lot of issues about the privacy of the testing and what her rights as a athlete and person were, and if that kind of stuff was being violated. But at the end of that process in 2010, they said, yes, she is a woman. She gets to compete as a woman. You keep your medal from the World Championships. And she's gone to be very, very successful Olympic champion, I believe, after that as well. I remember in that 2009 race and in lots of international competition in the 800 meter, I have a friend who we're in the same recruiting class at Cal, and a girl named Alicia Johnson, now Alicia Montano, who, if you watch Olympic track and field, you may know her as the Flying Flower, runs with the big yellow flower in her hair. I think Alicia is 7 or 8 time national champion in the U.S. U.S. national champion in the 800. Phenomenal athlete. And I've talked about her on a previous episode in regards to retroactive drug testing, how she took 5th in the 2012 Olympics, and that 2 of the athletes above her ended up failing retroactive tests, and she lost out on 4 years of being bronze medalist, Alicia Johnson, instead of being 5th place, Alicia Johnson, and the monetary gain and everything that goes along with that. Well, I've also seen her deal with racing against Castor Semenya, and I remember seeing that race in 2009 that Alicia was in, and I think got 5th at Worlds, thinking this is bullshit. This is a different playing field. But Castor Semenya has this SRY gene, androgen insensitivity. Her entire life has lived as a woman. Says female on the birth certificate, but has internal testes, suppressed androgen receptors, but with that, a lot of the other performance benefits to some degree that performance differences to some degree that come along with being a man, such as, taller. She's like 5'10", 160. Generally heavier, bigger heart, bigger lungs,
Right.
less body fat, denser bones, more red blood cells, narrower hips, which is a big one for sprinting performance, relatively greater upper body strength. So with that, Caster created a lot of controversy, a lot of discussion about this topic. The other athlete I mentioned, Dudi Chand from India, she was breaking all these Indian national records, and then they came along and said, all right, we're doing gender tests, and then they said she had too much testosterone, even though in the same situation, born as a woman, lived her whole life as a woman. And, that's still, I guess, kind of undergoing arbitration, at least the part of how much testosterone should women really have. If you ever shower or brush your teeth and try to make your hair look presentable, hopefully all three of those things, I've got good news for you. Dollar Shave Club has a lot of stuff to help you out. Even though I'm ruggedly handsome with my beard, I've found several products from Dollar Shave Club that I really like, particularly the lavender body wash and their toothpaste are both great, make you feel fresh, smell good. Dollar Shave Club has everything you need to get ready in the bathroom. Dollar Shave Club, yes, that Dollar Shave Club delivers everything you need to look, feel, and smell your best. You name it. Shampoo, conditioner, body wash, toothpaste, hair gel, even a wipe that'll leave your tush feeling tingly clean. I'm a big fan of their amber and lavender calming body cleanser. Never smelled anything like it, and good luck finding a product like that at the store. All of Dollar Shave Club's products are made with top shelf ingredients that won't break your budget. You'll feel the difference, plus shipping is included with your membership. And here's a great way to try a bunch of Dollar Shave Club products for just $5. You can get their Daily Essential Starter Set. It comes with body cleanser, One Wipe Charlie's, amazing butt wipes, their world famous shave butter, and the best razor, their 6-blade executive. Keep the blades coming for a few bucks more a month. Add in shampoo, toothpaste, or anything else you need for the bathroom. Check it all out at dollarshaveclub.com/JuggLife. That's dollarshaveclub.com/JuggLife. So it all goes to beg the question, in the case of athletes with the SRY gene, is how much does testosterone help? What is the difference between performing as a man and performing as a woman? There was a paper written in 1992 by some physiologists at UCLA, published in the Journal of Nature. The title of the paper is, Will Women Soon Outrun Men? And in this, I don't see how these guys ever came to this conclusion, but in it, through graphing the progress of men's and women's world records across like all track and field events, they projected that women would beat men in track and field events by the year 2156. And they were saying this because the progress in women's in the women's world records was much more rapid. And that was happening for a number of reasons. It was happening because women hadn't been in the sport as long. There was even times up in like the 30s, maybe even until the 50s, where women were not allowed to do certain events.
Right.
They felt that the longer running events were too strenuous for women's bodies to do. So they just had a shorter lifespan of these women's events, which of course is going to yield greater improvement. And then there was this other thing that happened. It was called steroids. So
It happened.
Yeah. So it's the men had been using that for a longer period of time, since the late 50s, where for women that was probably coming on a little bit later as women's sports became more and more competitive. That got introduced to things. Good example of how that's going to accelerate performance and concentrate performance and skew this kind of experiment that these guys were doing in the women's shot put. Of the top 80 performances of all time, 75 of them happened between 1975 and 1990. And a time that, sports historians such as ourselves understand it was a free-for-all.
Yeah.
It was a free-for-all of drug use.
It's like hometown buffet, but with D-ball and all sorts of other good stuff.
From the Soviet Union, East Germany, and let's not be naive and exempt American women from this either. It was a smorgasbord of stanazolol. So, of course, it had this highly accelerated performance. And the reason that performance was being accelerated, I think, gets right to the heart of this issue. It's how is the Court of Arbitration of Sport saying to the IAAF, well, prove to us that testosterone helps. Well, then why the fuck is there drug testing if you guys are in question?
I find that really interesting that they have to even state that they can even state that in that. I guess they're trying to say prove that it actually makes a difference for women, but they already have rules in place that would preclude that would prevent somebody from taking the drugs if they were just any female competitor. Taking testosterone is against the rules. Now they're asking to prove that it's actually. What if the case was made that it does not improve performance, or
what happens to drug testing?
They can prove it. Then how could they ever suspend anybody for taking testosterone?
Yeah, and maybe this is a lack of understanding on our part in terms of, or maybe you understand it. The answer here is a lot of about testing for testosterone is the ratio. 6 to 1.
4 to 1.
Is it 4 to 1 now?
I think it's 4 to 1 in weightlifting.
It definitely used to be 6 to 1 for track.
Yeah, it may have even been higher in the past.
It was 10 to 1 for cycling.
Yeah.
Which seems very odd to me that, like, oh yeah, these cyclists might just have super high testosterone.
Yeah, very odd.
But does it matter? Is the ratio affected by the nanomoles per liter of testosterone, or is this like a total testosterone number? Because a 6 to 1 ratio could be 6 to 1, or it could be 1,000 or 6,000 to 1,000.
Yeah. So I may be mistaken, and correct me if I'm wrong. I believe they used to start the testing procedure first by doing a ratio test. Mm-hmm. If you failed the ratio test, then they would do a further test to see the absolute value of testosterone, of free testosterone, or whatever they're testing. So if you didn't fail the ratio test, they wouldn't even do the second test. And I believe what people were doing was titrating testosterone with estrogen right up next to the meat so that the ratio test wouldn't set off a red flag.
Well, and that's a lot of what like Balco and the Clear and the Cream was about.
Right.
It was about keeping raising the free testosterone compared to DHT or whatever it is. I actually don't know what the ratio is of.
I think it's epitestosterone.
Oh yeah,
right.
Okay.
So
they were just taking both testosterone and epitestosterone.
So your total value comes up, which is going to be performance enhancing, but it doesn't set off the red flag of a ratio that's off. And I believe now the current procedure is to test the total free testosterone, the total value, which makes more sense anyways, because if you find right off the bat it's high, they're just out.
Who was the MMA guy, Alistair Overeem? Yeah, like 53 to 1.
I got a great story about Alistair Overeem.
And he tried to claim that it was natural.
Yeah, he tried to claim it was natural. So we're in the hospital in Thailand. We went to Thailand, and we're there, and my son hurt his foot, and so we go to the hospital, and I'm standing in the hospital in Thailand, and I'm looking, it's like this kind of really big open atrium, and there's like these glass doors, and I see this dude, and I just recognize him. I'm like, I know this guy, I think. I'm pretty sure I know who this guy is. And he sees me, and he makes eye contact, and he knows, and there's a look on his face like, he knows I know who he is, but I don't know who he is yet. Mm-hmm. And we're looking at each other for a second, and then he kind of just goes away, turns away, and 5 minutes later he comes out of the room with his girlfriend, who was a very attractive young lady. And I see him, I'm like, looking at him, and he's looking at me, like, again, the same look, and then I realized, that's Alistair Overeem. And he was just hanging out there, probably
And he's
They're
like,
probably getting his testosterone naturally checked. Or
he's like, oh my God, it's Rudy Nielsen.
and he said, hey, Rudy Nielsen.
Holy shit, it's Seth Rogen.
Yeah. He thought I was somebody else.
But yeah, so there's the ratio stuff, and I'm not 100% sure how this nanomoles per liter of testosterone is related to the ratio, and the difference of testing for synthetic testosterone versus natural testosterone, and how all that works. But it sounds a bit fishy, and this idea that and to read from whatever article I took this from, I can't remember. The Chand ruling, so this is the Court of Arbitration of Sport ruling in favor of sprinter Duty Chand of India, who had been barred from competition in 2014 due to testosterone levels above established limits. Chand ruling provisionally cleared the way for intersex athletes to compete without testosterone parameters. The IAAF has 2 years to show why the limit should be restored. Meanwhile, Caster Semenya, during the same time, running during a period of no rules limitations, is unbeaten in 9 800-meter finals, and at a meet in South Africa in the spring, she won the 400, 800, and 1500 in times, each of which would have been competitive at the world level. If Semenya was indeed suddenly freed from drugs to suppress her testosterone, the effect on her sport was even more dramatic than on her times. So that's the other part, is these hypoandrogynous athletes with the SRY gene. Some of them are having to take testosterone suppressing drugs similarly to what a transgender athlete like Laurel Hubbard, transitioning from male to female, would need to do to make sure that their levels are under, or at least were having to do this to make sure their levels were under the 10 nanomoles per liter. Mm-hmm. So to get back to the, sorry, what were you going to say?
The basically you have unrestricted. I mean, to have no actual limit on that is just obscene.
Yeah, that does.
It's just bizarre too. From any perspective, it's like there has to be some kind of boundary there, right? I mean, whether the boundary is even the fact that it doesn't even exist is just bizarre. I mean, why wouldn't you just have some kind of finite number that you can assign to it? Even if that's ridiculous, it's still.
Particularly because with this limit currently not existing, the idea of 2 years of hormone therapy post-op to be able to compete in the IOC for someone like Laurel Hubbard, it's just so vague. If the level is 30, okay, she gets hormone therapy to bring it to 25,
right?
And is nearly unaffected.
Yeah.
So, we had this paper projecting, will women soon outrun men? That was clearly a very erroneous projection by them because, well, one, it sounded like they'd never actually watched any of these sports. Like, that just ain't how it works. But in their research, they completely negated the idea of female athletes using performance-enhancing drugs.
Right.
Basically, all of which are testosterone derivatives.
Right.
So this idea that the IAAF has to prove that testosterone is useful to females is asinine to me.
Yeah.
Looking at some other differences in performance from men's world records to women's world records, in the 100 meters, 10% difference. In the marathon, 10% difference. In the long jump, 19% difference. 50-meter freestyle swimming, 13% difference. Speed skating, 1,000 meters, 9% difference. Weightlifting, and this was just one weight class comparison. I think the 69s to 69s, 25% difference. So in the sport that's probably most pertinent to what we're talking about, a 25% advantage for men's lifters compared to women's lifters. Yes, that is, the biggest contributing factor to that is probably testosterone, but also significant contributing factors are going to be the things we mentioned before. Less body fat, denser bones, hip structure, the natural upper body strength And the study, and I'll try and post in the comments of this stuff, like these different articles that I was getting these from. But upper body strength differences was 3 standard deviations of men, any man off the street compared to any woman off the street, upper body strength comparison, meaning 997 out of 1,000 men were likely to have greater upper body strength than the female. So some of those are related to testosterone, but some of them are related to bone structure and all that kind of stuff, things that don't change with hormone therapy.
Yeah. Yeah, I guess you could look at it and say, assuming you had a female who was taking testosterone for 25 years, then cessation of testosterone for 2 years, the effect has to be, there's got to be some significant performance benefit to doing that because, 25 years of augmentation followed by a small time of not, just as you would if you were a male for 25 years, then you're not, and you're competing against people that had nowhere close to that level of testosterone in their body ever.
Yeah. So a couple other notes before we kind of get into the bigger discussion of all this, just to frame what we're talking about in regards to performance differences between men and women. We have an athlete named Joanna Harper, and if you haven't read the book or listened to the audiobook version of it, in my case, The Sports Gene, who's the author's name is escaping me for a second here, but the David Epstein, The Sports Gene by David Epstein, he has a chapter in there called Why Men Have Nipples, and it talks about a lot of these genetic differences, and in it he talks about an athlete named Joanna Harper, who is Masters national champion in cross country in 2009. And Joanna Harper had transitioned from male to female in 2004. So 2004 is our line of demarcation. In 2005, she ran about 50 seconds slower per mile than she had in 2003. So that's a significant difference. That's a big difference, having gone through the hormone therapy, gender reassignment surgery, and hormone therapy, to lose 50 seconds per mile in a run. But as far as sex and age-graded performance, showed about the same level of competitiveness for either one. So in that sport, cross-country maybe is it's going to be probably different based on these different sports, more explosive sports to more endurance-based sports. Laurel Hubbard, grandmaster from Masters World Games recently in New Zealand, snatched 6 kilos more competing as a woman than she ever did competing as a man. And now these are N1 examples. This is not formalized study. There's time and training that went on there. She could have been doing program as a man and a great one as a woman. But all things considered, they're 6 kilos more.
Yeah. Yeah, I guess that's actually a very intriguing scenario in that you would assume if Harper is running 50 seconds less, where running would seem like it'd be even less affected than weightlifting. Mm-hmm. It's pure power-based sport, but still improving. From a lot of perspectives, it's just very interesting. That's impressive that there's progress still. Again, training program can have a huge impact on that. And a host of psychological factors too. If you just feel more comfortable as a person, you might do better in training and yada yada yada. But yeah, very interesting.
So what all of this kind of comes down to is a discussion of fairness, of what is fair, and how should these athletes be treated? Where should they compete? Who should they compete against? And I think it's too clear. It has to be differentiated between Laurel Hubbard, lived as a man, transitioned to compete as a female, versus Caster Semenya, born as a woman, lived as a woman with this condition that was, and until someone does a gender test on you, you probably have no idea about.
Those testes were hidden the whole time.
Yeah. So to me, to set the marker at 2 years of hormone therapy, particularly with this lack of clear line of this much testosterone is allowed, 2 years I don't think could possibly be significant enough.
Yeah.
I don't know what the number is, but more than 2 years is what I think it is.
Yeah. Well, I mean, to the bigger picture too, the bigger sort of discussion is, I mean, the rules are the rules. So the issue is none of the issues are ever with the competitors, because they're simply playing by the rules as they see them, as the rules exist. So all of these scenarios, anything we're saying in terms of making things more fair, et cetera, is always a matter of pointing out where the rules and the actual decisions to say, hey, this is the limit, that's the time frame, et cetera, that stuff's all based within the rules of the sport. It's certainly an interesting scenario in that no one's really created a position or created any kind of situation to say, hey, like, we can say that 2 years or 6 months or 18 months is the right time frame because of this. It almost appears to be just completely arbitrary.
Yes.
Just pick a number out of your ass, and there you go. It's
one more real important stat that I forgot to bring up and that will be useful here is during this time of doing the cheek swabs as the gender identification test for the Olympics, from 1968 to 1996, they found on average 1 in 420 women. Specifically at the 96 Olympics, it was 1 out of 480, but over the whole time span, almost 30 years, which is significant, body of evidence there. 1 in 480 women competing in the Olympics across all sports had the SRY gene, androgen insensitivity. A typical rate of that in the female population is somewhere between 1 in 20,000 and 1 in 64,000. So 500 to 1,500 times more likely.
Yeah.
To exist in a female Olympian than in the general population. So
that's good talent identification.
Yeah. and that kind of seems like it is the thing with the SRY gene, is with that you're really just getting a female who has great genetics for their sport, which is a big difference than getting a male who transitions to a female.
Right.
So to me, there has to be some kind of distinction drawn here. One, there should definitely be a testosterone limit. Right. The fact that there's any debate about is testosterone helpful to female athletes is ridiculous. Of course it's helpful. If they decide that it's not helpful, then everyone
just start taking it.
Yeah, it gets as much ridiculous as they want. Like, then they would. I don't see how they could argue to not let female athletes who are not transgender or do not have SRY gene, how they could stop them from taking testosterone up to that limit. Like that's ridiculous.
You could almost even say, here's the data we've collected of all the data we can find on testosterone levels in blood for female competitors, female people, and from that pool of data, you say, okay, the average level on the high side, on the low side, this is the average, right? It's not 400 nanograms per deciliter. It's like 10, right? So that could be the start of that discussion as to where the limit is, right? It's based off of evidence we have for people, not just a ratio of 6 to 1 or 8 to 1 is just superhuman. I mean, that's it's so rare. It's usually closer to 1-to-1, 2-to-1, and I'm sure there's cases where it can be very high, but you're taking. There's obviously a leniency towards this being very open-ended, and if you created something that was much tighter, where there's an absolute limit that's very close to physiological levels, you have a much better scenario for testing.
Well, do we know? So this data to me is showing the 1 in 480 women, and just generally one of the other things they talk about in Sports Gene was from this testing of Olympic athletes and stuff that they were generally on the high side of testosterone.
Sure.
Anyways, they were talking about females. Do you know, or do you think that that's the same thing is true for males? That male Olympic athletes are generally
Probably, yeah.
higher testosterone levels?
I would have to believe so. I mean,
Yeah.
I would have to believe, that the higher testosterone males are going to be driven and selected to be in those sports, right? I mean,
Yeah.
or in sports.
So if naturally higher testosterone males are being allowed to compete, and there's whatever limit on that testosterone being placed, but they tend towards the higher side of things, then women, and when I'm saying that, I mean born as a woman, lived as their whole life as a woman, tend towards the higher side of the testosterone as well. That to me makes perfect sense.
Right. Yeah.
What does not is to have a woman transitioning, or a man transitioning to woman, and to not just have the benefits of higher testosterone with the other physical attributes, height, heart size, lung size, bone density, red blood cell count, hip structure being relatively the same, but now to take all of those advantages and only diminish this one advantage, not eliminate this one advantage, but diminish it to a point that it's still 3 to 20 times higher than the normal range for women. To me, seems like these governing bodies in sport are doing female athletes a disservice.
Yeah. Well, that's the interesting case, right? I think, and I would say especially in like the transition, the people that are transitioning from male to female, because I don't believe there are women transitioning to men that are succeeding in sport at a high level against men. That were men from birth or that didn't transition.
That to me is the simplest argument about the fairness of gender identity, transgender athletes in sport.
Yeah.
All of it is man transitioning to woman and winning and beating everyone and setting all these new records. When and maybe someone has an example of this and they can post it in the comments. When there is one, and we really need more than one, but when there is a example of female transitioning to male and being a champion, an international champion in that sport, then I think we can begin to discuss. Oh, well, it doesn't matter if you're a man or a woman. It's all about the hormones, right? It's all about the hormone therapy.
Yeah.
When Jara Lee Vega, this is well known, so it's not like we're talking about a secret. If Jara Lee Vega was the American record holder, is the American record holder in the snatch, clean, jerk, and total in the 63 kilo class.
Just the clean, jerk, and total.
Oh, okay.
Woolfolk has the snatch.
Oh, clean, jerk, and total, and now has transitioned. I don't know at what stage of the transition. Definitely the hormone therapy part. I can't speak to the surgery part of things. But if she comes along or he comes along and starts competing as a male and sets the American record in the clean and jerk and the total, then sure, then we can have a discussion that
it's all copacetic.
It's all about the hormones, and you just do the hormone therapy, and it's all fine.
Yeah,
because what is being done now is in an effort of political correctness or sensitivity, oversensitivity, whatever it is. that they're being, in an effort to be fair to an incredibly small minority of female athletes, they are being unfair, potentially creating a environment that can be unfair to the overwhelming majority of the female athletes.
Yeah. Well, I mean, it's also, there's so many really interesting cultural aspects and social aspects to it too. I mean, this only really affects female competitors.
Yeah.
In that the male competitors, 50% of the field. It's very interesting. I mean, there's a lot to be said for what are the ramifications of it. I honestly don't believe there's going to be hordes of men changing gender to compete with women. I don't think that's the case. So, assuming that's not the case, does it lend itself to say it would perhaps be more fair to everybody if there was another category for people that have changed gender from one or the other, right? Female to male and male to female, to compete against people that have the most similar situation to you would be the most fair. I mean, the irony is that in masters competitions, you don't compete against people of different age groups initially. You compete against everybody in the same age group first. So they're even distinguishing based on age. There needs to be more categories. If they can make the assumption there needs to be distinguished categories for different ages, 5 years, wouldn't the same be said for having, a certain amount of time as a different gender to be switched to another? And that, I mean, that's where I feel like it's kind of an interesting. There's so many categories, yet there isn't a category here, and maybe it is just a matter of sport recognizing these people and saying, hey, you deserve to have your own level playing field amongst people that are in the same situation as you, and be recognized as excellent athletes in that position, rather than being put into categories that are not necessarily fair to everybody involved in it, right?
Sleep is important. The quality of your sleep affects the quality of your daily life. I know that when I have a good night's sleep, I'm up, well rested, my training is better, I'm able to create better content for all you JuggLife fans compared to if I'm tossing and turning all night and then I'm dragging the next day and just nothing goes as well. So if you're struggling to get a good night's sleep, try a Purple mattress. Purple Mattress is the leading comfort tech company that uses cutting-edge science to create the world's most comfortable sleep and sit products. Purple was founded over 25 years ago by two brothers, Tony Pierce, a rocket scientist, and Terry Pierce, a manufacturing engineer. That's quite the duo of brothers there. And along the way, they invented the Smart Comfort Grid, the patented comfort technology behind Purple's products. That's kind of like Purple's secret sauce. And the Purple Smart Comfort Grid is scientifically engineered to adapt to any body type or sleeping position. It works by actively cradling your shoulders and hips while gently supporting your back for a unique zero-gravity-like feel. So you can check out the unique feel of Purple Mattress. Unlike anything else out there, it comes in 3 different comfort levels, so you can choose exactly how firm or how soft you want it to be. Get it for a 100-night risk-free trial, and if you're not fully satisfied, you can return your mattress for a full refund, free shippings, and returns backed by a 10-year warranty. You're going to love Purple, and right now our listeners get a free sheet set and mattress cover with your mattress purchase. Just go to purple.com/JuggLife. That's purple.com/JuggLife. purple.com/JuggLife. I don't remember if I was reading Facebook comments or saw an interview about this with Janae Marie Krosielewski, formerly Matt Krosielewski, talking about having gone on hormone therapy and that kind of stuff, and how his strength levels were affected, and kind of saying like, I ended up doing about the numbers that these top female powerlifters are doing.
Yeah.
That was, 650 squat, 400 bench, or 600 squat, 400 bench, 650 deadlift, something around there.
Sure.
And powerlifting, untested powerlifting becomes such a further clouded issue because, hormone therapy is not the right term going on.
A lot of self-medication.
Yeah, a lot of self-medication in untested female powerlifting that kind of clouds the issue more. But he was saying, he went from being this top men's lifter to lifting the numbers, not in competition, but lifting the numbers the same as the top female lifters. So is that evidence that it's the same? And it's only a one person example, but
yeah, I feel like that's got to be a stretch because I mean he maybe, let's say those numbers were the same, that you're talking about somebody who's coming down to that from a super physiological level as a male, and who was a very, very strong male, top, 0.1%, to now would be literally the strongest female.
Yeah.
Right? I think that's almost more of if he came down and became, top 10% of elite female lifters, maybe that would be a little more kind of buy into the idea that, okay, maybe they are more equal, because there's got to be women that are very, very predisposed and talented to it and taking drugs.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know.
Well, it's like you said, the example you said before. If you have a female athlete, so we have a male athlete transitioning to female at age 25. So for 25 years lived as a male, regular testosterone levels, everything that comes along with that. And then at age 27 has now passed the IOC standard of 2 years of hormone therapy post-op to compete as a female. People are much more inclined to say that is okay, I think.
Yeah.
Rather than have a female, and this is going to be off because, no one is taking steroids as a baby, but for the sake of this, 25 years of performance-enhancing drug use, and then cutting that out at age 25 to then compete at age 27 in a situation that they can pass the drug test, let's say, and I know different things, you're supposed to have been clean for 2 years or 3 years or 7 years, and you sign your name and whatever and say that you have been. If you pass the test, you pass the test.
Yeah.
So let's say 25 years of drug use, stop for 2 years and compete. Almost no one is going to be like, oh, that's fair.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, they could theoretically just say, sport isn't necessarily about being all-inclusive. Sport is about qualifying for the standards to compete. And we're talking about the Olympics and these top-level sports. You could almost say that any manipulation of hormones is against the rules. Up, down, whatever. Side to side. Any kind of change of hormones for a medical reason or anything is not allowed. And you're going to obviously eliminate a lot of people that have medical conditions, all of those things. But, there's obviously temporary use exemption forms, which come into play that bring up another big issue when the entire water polo team has asthma and they all have clenbuterol prescriptions, and you have prescription for Adderall, the super, super strong stimulants. There's so much gray area around all of this, just in the world of sports being generally on the shadier side, and all of that. But it's very interesting. I will say that it's a confusing scenario. It's difficult to explain how it makes sense or how it fits into the realm of being fair when you have to explain it as simply as you can to someone who's maybe 10 years old. How do you explain the idea that it's
to that exact situation? That is a scenario that happened in New Zealand for you guys.
Yes, it did, yeah.
Your son, Asher, 10 years old, there with you. He sees his mom, Joanne, lift great, make these PRs, and then not win
Yeah.
Grandmaster. What was that conversation? What was Joe's reaction to it? Even
I think everyone was just kind of confused.
And Joanne's about as progressive Bay Area person.
We live in San Francisco. Joanne has no. There's no issues with the situation. We're just confused. I think the confusion from a lot of people, I think, there was more a matter of for one is, let's say you're in that situation. You're in,
Laurel Hubbard.
I was Miss Hubbard. I'm not sure. You're in Hubbard's cupboard here, and you're having to say, okay, I'm going to compete because I'm allowed to compete, which is fair. You win. What is the motive? I suppose if you believe that it's fair and it's right and you're within the rules, it's fine. When you have to step back and say, it's very easy to put up an argument saying, clearly this is not as fair as it may seem on the surface.
Well, I would be interested to ask Laurel Hubbard, who was competing as a Masters, how old she was?
35, I think, 36.
Right. So let's say Laurel Hubbard's 36. Laurel Hubbard, what do you think about a female athlete taking steroids?
Right.
Up until age 34, having taken them for as long a period of time as conceivable, and then stopping for 2 years and passing the test and competing against you as a woman.
Yeah.
Is that fair to her? I would be shocked.
That's what I think is most interesting, right? Well, or let's say you qualify for the Olympics, go to the Olympics, and you get just murdered by, a Russian woman who has a doping violation at 14 years old by 50 kilos in the total. I mean, how do you feel about that? I mean, it's a very I got beat fair and square because they're within the written rules, by the rules as they are stated, not the spirit of the rules here.
I know the
really odd.
The number 2 seed in Marissa's weight class for IPF Worlds upcoming, Olga Golubayeva, a Russian lifter, has served a doping suspension.
Probably tainted meat or something.
Probably the target, those Moscow targets.
It's got a backwards R in the title. I mean that's again, I think everyone was very confused. I would say it's more confusion as to what's happening here. What are we watching? How does this work? I don't think. There's obviously people that say, oh, it's wrong, it's wrong. I don't necessarily agree that it's wrong. I think it's just there's a confusion as to, I think this is probably something within the realm of sports that is very poorly, the rules are very poorly laid out. They're very kind of almost like off the cuff, like they had to figure it out on the spot, and they sort of just went with this. I mean, it used to be, that whatever society and culture were, it was easy to just say, pull your pants down and we'll do that. Yeah. And they kind of just, maybe turned the blind eye to what was going on, or they didn't acknowledge people for where they believe they should be acknowledged. But now it's a situation where, this has happened. These situations in which there are speculation as to, gender testing scenarios. You have the people that have genetic predispositions to different things. You have people that are transitioning. There needs to be a better understood and established method for, the rules by which they compete, where they compete, how that's fair for all athletes.
Yeah.
Now, I know like CrossFit, there was issues a few years ago with an athlete that was trying to compete in CrossFit and was flat out just denied.
Yes.
In which CrossFit is a private business, so they can kind of do whatever they want. But their logic was very straightforward, as I believe, was just, well, you had the advantages of being a male for so long, and you changed, and so that's not fair.
And in that instance, at least the transition had happened
really long time.
Yeah, 15 years before the CrossFit issue came about.
Yeah.
But yeah, to me, it and I know the question of what is gender, what is someone's gender, in the last 5 years, 10 years, whatever, has become a much, much more complex answer than...
Well, you got Mankini.
than when your mom gave birth to you and the doctor said, congrats,
Yeah.
you have a new baby boy. Congrats, you have a new baby girl. The question, the answer to that has become much, much more complex.
Right.
I don't know that the complexity and feelings and nuance of all of those answers should enter into what sports or what division that the people are supposed to be competing in. To me, that's a much more simple line to draw of you are going to compete as the gender that you were born.
Right.
Where it's a more gray area when you get into this androgen insensitivity syndrome, SRY gene, hyperandrogenism of people who have, when they were born, they said, this is a girl, but have the internal testes and high testosterone level that comes along with that. That's a much more complex thing.
Yeah.
Clearly, there should be a limit on testosterone that female competitors can have implemented.
Yeah,
that is no brainer. But for my opinion, competing as the gender that someone was born, there are nuances to that answer now that are beyond my understanding, and that's for someone else to answer. But
it's funny if you think about, let's say the rules are just the rules. They're exactly the way they are. You're going to get drug tested randomly out of competition. 15 years ago, Laurel Hubbard would have failed at least 2 drug tests for having too high a testosterone level. So there's a scenario where you would have already been banned and ineligible to compete anyways, because in the same scenario,
yes, that's a good
you're
point.
A female at 14 years old, Katarina Tatiana fails drug test. She has a drug test on her name at 14. You circumvented the you circumvented the rules by being a different gender then, and now it benefits you when you transition, right? I think, it's a very odd place. Because there's no way you'd pass a drug test.
Yeah.
You have testosterone level that's 10 times what a woman was at the time.
That's a very good point.
Very odd.
Yeah, I think that's one of the easiest analogies or whatever to use is extended time of drug use versus extended time of being a man, and then a 2-year transitional period of off drugs, hormone therapy. One of them people are much more inclined to protect, much more inclined to say that this is okay. And I get that there's emotion and sympathy and empathy and these incredibly high rates of suicide within transgender people and all this stuff. And that's why people, I think, are wanting to say, yeah, this is okay. Because no one's saying this woman who's been doing steroids, who would have been caught 10 times over, she can compete now because she was clean for 2 years.
Yeah, it's
because
really,
there's no feelings and empathy about that.
It's purely would have been a violation of the rules back then. What's interesting too is I'm not sure how correct me if I'm wrong, and I'm sure people will. But I believe in certain sports, maybe certain countries, there's what's called a doping passport. And this is a passport that you essentially have that's stamped, and they keep records of testing when it's done, and they do blood testing where they'll keep track of red blood cell count, testosterone levels, and these things. And they keep track of this data throughout the course of the athlete's career. This may be a German thing, where they keep track of these things, and if they see, it's usually for red blood cell, like EPO and stuff, where, we have a baseline for 5 years here. Now suddenly your red blood cell count is twice as high. What's going on? Because you have to have, you can't compare. You don't know exactly where that is, right?
Yeah.
But if you have somebody who would again, the same situation, had a doping passport, had 5 years of, extremely high testosterone levels for a female, then all of a sudden they drop, and now you're a female and you're competing. There's the statistical analysis that's not going to, it's going to show that you would have been guilty of doping violation then. Yeah.
Yeah. So, I mean, at the end of the day, it's a big question. It's a tough question. It's one that neither Max or I have the answer to, but certainly we have our opinions about it. It hit close to home. Yeah. The situation with Joe and competing against Laurel Hubbard in New Zealand, and it's a conversation that needs to be had because, in my opinion, these governing bodies of sport, in an effort to be fair to the minority, are being unfair to the majority of their competitors. It's going to be something that over the next several years, I'm sure, is going to hit close to home again. Whether it's Ada v. Hubbard, round 2, or it starts coming into effect USAW, IPF powerlifting, this different stuff. It's gonna be something we have to deal with, and it's going to be something that there have to be questions about.
Sure.
So, hopefully we brought up some good points. Like I said, I tried to do a good little bit of research on this and have some useful numbers and useful case studies and stuff to bring to the table with this. We're interested to hear your feedback, so please, if we messed things up, if we said the wrong term, if we got some of the rules wrong, let us know in the comments. Please try and keep the discussion, respectful and just respectful, because it is something that's very sensitive to people, but a conversation that needs to be had. So with that, I think we kind of end that discussion. Max, where can they find you?
You can find me on Instagram and Facebook, Max_Ada, or you can email me, MaxJTSStrength, for any questions about online coaching or the Juggernaut team.
And I'm Chad Wesley Smith, at Chad Wesley Smith and at Juggernaut Training on Facebook and Instagram, filling up your news feed all day. Make sure to subscribe to the Juggernaut YouTube channel with the best fitness videos on all of YouTube. And if you enjoyed the podcast, please go on iTunes, leave us a 5-star review, write us something funny, and we always appreciate seeing those. Till the next time.